Hey, this is Larry Sanger, and this is the What is Crypto podcast.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of What is Crypto. Today, I've got a special guest on the line. I have Larry Sanger. Larry Sanger is an American author, and specifically, he's an American internet project developer and co-founder of the internet encyclopedia Wikipedia, of which he wrote much of the original governing policy. He has also worked on other online educational websites such as Nupedia and Everpedia, which a lot of people in the blockchain cryptocurrency world know about. Today, we dive into the conversation of, can we protect against fake news? With so many different news outlets and news sources today in modern media, things can get miscued and manipulated, and people can get lied to very, very easily. So we dive into the problem of how people are being manipulated by media, print, social, and online content. Also, we talk about what tools do we have to fight against this manipulation. Finally, we dive into how cryptocurrency and blockchain technology can play a role in eliminating some of this manipulation. Finally, guys, this is not financial advice. We're not financial advisors. This is for education purposes only. Please come dive into our Facebook community to ask any questions you want. And come join us in Patreon to get extra content in every single episode. All right, guys, let's listen to what Larry has to say. Cool. So can we just start off by talking a little bit about what was your involvement with Wikipedia and how did you find, or what challenges did you find as you were building that company?
I am a co-founder. I like to call myself ex-founder of Wikipedia. It was my idea to basically use wikis to build an encyclopedia. I led the project in its seminal first 14 months. I wrote a lot of the original policy and basically got this global community together. Basically, in the first year that I was working on these projects, I was actually working on something called Nupedia, and Wikipedia was actually an outgrowth of that, and then it took on a life of its own. But for Nupedia, I gathered 2,000 people, basically, and a fair number of those people were interested in working on Wikipedia, whereas they weren't so much interested in working on Nupedia. In fact, leadership, the editorial board, mostly PhD professors, they didn't want to have anything to do with a wiki. When I first proposed the idea of having a Nupedia wiki, that's why I had to start it on a different domain name. So I came up with the name Wikipedia, launched it on January 15th. At the time, Wikipedia wasn't a company. It was just a project of Bomis. And, he was doing other things mostly. So it was mostly me actually working on it. His main job was to pay my salary. That's such as it was. The most important thing that I did when I was there, I imagine, was simply to cheerlead and teach the ideas behind how to use a wiki to make an encyclopedia article, and actually a web of encyclopedia articles. So, because nobody had ever done that before. So
I imagine there was some challenges making sure the information was correct. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we didn't really think too much about that in the first year, to tell the absolute truth. We were more interested in just getting boatloads of content up there. Of course, if people started sharing a lot of detailed information, even early on, even in the first year, we were encouraging people to include a bibliography and footnotes and so forth. It took a little while before the software actually supported footnotes. Yeah, I mean, it was actually much more important in the beginning just to get content up there. In the beginning, it was just a without realizing it, without the word even having been invented, it was a great SEO trick. But no, ultimately, obviously, my background is in philosophy and the theory of knowledge. And so I did a fair bit of thinking and planning related to making sure that the articles were high quality. Just getting everybody on board, moving in the same direction, writing encyclopedia articles rather than dictionary definitions and other stuff. Basic stuff actually needed to be done before we started trying to really lock things down in terms of, reliability. To a certain extent, that came later.
Awesome. And how are people manipulating media, whether it be digital, print media, things like that? What's happening in terms of this issue in this current time right now?
This isn't new, actually. We've seen stories about this going back over 10 years ago, where different politicians' offices will be caught with their hands in the cookie jar, basically. And that's because it's possible for people to see the IP addresses of people who are logging in to make edits. So somebody at a politician's office, for example, would, without making an account, because that's possible on Wikipedia, just start editing a page about the boss. And then, or maybe it's the politician himself or herself, and just start editing it. And people noticed that, oh, hey, this edit is actually made at the office of the person. And a lot of servers are set up in such a way that actually makes it easy to see who is actually editing the article if you have the right kind of, tracking going on. It's not just politicians. It's increasingly, as people have realized how important Wikipedia is. I think this has just gotten more and more pronounced over the last 10 years. It's become a part of PR, so what's your Wikipedia article look like, and do you have one? And there's actually a small industry of people writing articles for Wikipedia or editing articles for Wikipedia. It's interesting. There's rumors, and I am not current myself about the evidence along these lines, but I am led to believe that this is also conducted at high levels, high government levels, like the CIA, for example, other spy agencies, which are going in and systematically editing things. That's actually one thing that the Chinese government has recently been accused of. Again, I can't give you the details because it's just yet another example of the same old thing that I've heard about so many times over the years. I mean, of course it's going to happen. It's trouble.
It is trouble. And what tools do we have to really fight against this, though?
One of the big problems with Wikipedia is precisely that even though there's no danger of it not having enough participation in order to keep it maintained, at least on topics that people care about actively. On the other hand, because it's anonymous, well, it's just too easy for people to make throwaway accounts or no account at all. That's actually less anonymous, to tell the truth, because then you're tracked by your IP address. Anyone can see your IP address. So what I did with a now more or less moribund competitor called Citizendium, I started this just as Wikipedia was experiencing its steepest growth curve in 2006 and 2007. So we got that started, and there one of the basic principles was you had to use your own real name. And that would help. That would definitely help, especially if there were an identity system that worked well. I think we're getting closer to having a distributed self-owned identity system, which is very important for this sort of thing. So if Wikipedia were to adopt such a thing, then it could get rid of such problems. But it's never going to do that. No way. That goes against everything that Wikipedians think the project should stand for. So there's a certain sort of baseline, never to be changed set of policies that define Wikipedia. Not having to log in order to edit articles, and tolerating anonymous and pseudonymous, especially, contributions is just absolutely required. So that's why I say probably the best solution is just to replace Wikipedia.
I want to give a big shout out to our first sponsor, and our first sponsor is Celsius Network. They are doing some really, really cool stuff, trying to revolutionize the way we think about the financial world and financial services. Celsius offers 10% annual interest on all crypto deposits, and there's no secret to how they're doing it. That 10% comes from them sharing 80% of their profits rather than the 0.0000001% that banks choose to share. Celsius is giving each user $10 in Bitcoin when they make their first 200 deposits or more in crypto or stable coins when they use the promo code NYE. These guys are working hard to revolutionize the way we look at the financial world, and they're taking on the banks. I'm personally a huge fan of what Celsius is building, so dive over to celsius.network to learn more and to use your promo code NYE in order to get $10 in BTC when you make your first deposit of $200 or more.
The problem with this whole dilemma has to it comes into the idea and the concept of freedom of speech, along with the argument of some people shouldn't be able to share specific things. It's a big argument with Wikipedia. It's an argument with Twitter. As we can see in the digital age, where some people have extremely radical opinions, or even some people create semi-anonymous accounts to the point where they don't really have any skin in the game and they can say anything they want without heavy repercussion. How do we find this balance, in your opinion, between having freedom of speech, allowing anybody to say anything they want, and especially in this digital era, and the balance of, honestly, some people shouldn't be saying some of these terrible things online?
Says you. I disagree. I'm pretty much as close to a free speech absolutist as it's possible to get without being just crazy. I have the traditional American attitude toward freedom of speech, which is an attitude that has simply never been taught to most younger people. I find they just don't. They're not aware of it. They don't know about it. I'll tell you about that. I mean, it doesn't really have to do with Wikipedia so much. Right, because Wikipedia, it basically has become the mouthpiece of the establishment. Whatever the establishment view is, that's okay to say. Anything that is contrary to the establishment view, that is to be minimized. Didn't used to be that way, by the way. It used to be much more neutral, allowing people basically to make up their own minds about things. So I've written a blog post about free speech, and I'm going to pull it up here, and I'm going to read a few things to you, if you don't mind. It's called A Free Speech Credo, and I am soon going to be, maybe by the time this podcast comes out, I will have a nicely illustrated video in which I go through this. So I'll just rehearse a few of the points from this document. The first thing is that free speech just is the right to say offensive things. If you don't have the right to say offensive things, then you don't have free speech. Because, well, why do I say that? It sounds kind of almost offensive itself, I suppose. But it shouldn't, because the only kind of speech that requires protection that you would want to assert a right over is a speech that would bother somebody, right? It would be offensive to somebody. So popular and safe speech needs no protection. It's only unpopular and unsafe speech that needs protection. So it actually is literally true that free speech is the right to say offensive things. Can't be defined that way, but the extent to which we care about free speech is the extent to which we care about being able to offend other people. So then the question is, if you want to make any rules about what people may or may not say based on what is offensive or not, then there's all kinds of problems with actually pinning down where the line should be. You might say, well, the main thing that I don't like to see online today is all the hate speech, right? Well, the problem is that you can't define hate speech in any way that really pins down the concept, that doesn't make it just another way to advance a political agenda. So Most people who want to protect hate speech also happen to abhor hate speech. That's just a fact. People want to protect hate speech not because they approve of it, but because they have a much greater horror of censorship. Why is there this huge horror of censorship? It is mainly because if we abandon free speech, what that means is there's somebody in authority who can determine what other people can say and what they can't say. You're conferring on them not just power, but due to the importance of speech in an otherwise democratic society, you're conferring arbitrary power. So basically, once the authorities gain the power to mold our thoughts, they won't easily give that up. And once they gain sufficient power to censor, authorities always impose their own values, their own vision of reality by force. That's what has happened over and over and over again in history. That's why the United States has the First Amendment. If people are not free to say what is on their mind, then somebody is going to determine that. And that's a huge amount of power. And the only way to take that sort of power away is through revolution.
Agreed, man. Agree. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show, man. It means a lot.
Absolutely.
That was a fun episode with Larry. This guy is intelligent. As you can tell, he's been working on many different successful ventures throughout his entire life, Wikipedia being one of the most notable websites in the entire interwebs. And I'm really grateful he had the time to come on today. So first off, thank you, Larry, if you're listening to this, for coming on the show. We really, really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the conversation, specifically around the fake news and how we can stop it. It's interesting to kind of speculate around blockchain technology and how this can play a role in this growing epidemic of fake news. It's also interesting because as we kind of progress more and more in life, I feel like we're getting more and more aware of how people are manipulating the news and how the manipulation of news affects the view of the general public on specific issues and things like that. And if we can become more aware of this, we can really change the way public perception works, and we can really change the way and the influence and the level of influence that some of these media companies have. So Larry really had some good points on that. Today, guys, in the Do Your Own Research section, I want you to go online and I want you to pick one news article that's recent and that's relevant, and I want you to do background research on it. And if you find something that's out of the ordinary, a little odd, or maybe just a stretch of the truth, or something that seems to be a little manipulated in terms of gaining favor towards one specific side of an issue or a topic, I want you to post about it in our Facebook group. Come join the Facebook community, and you can find it at whatiscrypto.com. Finally, guys, as always, please hit the subscribe button on iTunes, leave us a review, leave us a comment. It would mean a lot to us here at the What is Crypto team. All right, we will catch you in the next episode.